You ever feel like your brain is a web browser with 47 tabs open and none of them are loading properly?
Very day.
Mm,
Or if you're constantly forgetting things, why did I come into this room?
I don't know.
Struggling with time and feels like you're not living up to your potential.
And you might not just be disorganized or lazy. You might be living with underdiagnosed adult ADHD. And today we're unpacking the signs, the struggles, and the strengths of adults with ADHD with someone who truly gets it.
I'm Naty.
I'm Veda.
And we are here to thrive. Welcome back to Thrive by the Rising Muse. We've had a previous episode about ADHD, and at the time we had the absolute joy of speaking with Dr. Tamar Shtrambrand about childhood ADHD.
We're continuing that conversation, but shifting gears to talk about ADHD in adults. Yes, I said ADHD in adult, a topic that's gaining more visibility and empathy, but still carries a lot of stigma and a lot of misunderstanding.
Dr. Tamar is a licensed clinical psychologist, a former occupational therapist, a homeschooling mom of 3, hats off, with ADHD, and someone who truly walks the walk, both professionally and personally.
She also earned her PhD later in life while raising her kids and navigating her own spiritual and professional journey. She's smart, she's warm, she's real, and today she's helping us break down what adult ADHD looks like and how to manage it with grace, humor, and clarity. I like the humor part.
Welcome back to the show, Dr. Tamar.
Thank you for having me.
So let's jump right in. What are some of the common signs of ADHD in adults that are usually mistaken or unnoticed?
Okay,
Okay,
so it varies from person to person, and this is based on anecdotal evidence from talking to people about it who got their diagnosis later, and also personal anecdotal evidence because I self-diagnosed much later in life. So usually people say that they they always remember having had a very difficult time being able to sit still, even if they force themselves to sit still and pay attention. Mind tending to wander. A lot of mind chatter, like the brain never seems to be quiet. Difficulty getting started with an activity, and then once they're in the activity, they're okay. But if they get interrupted, or if the activity has to end abruptly for some reason, and then they do it later, it's very difficult to start over.
Now, how did you, because to me, that sounds very similar to anxiety. How can we tell those apart?
Well, people with ADHD struggle with a lot of anxiety. But anxiety is a passing thing. In dialectical behavioral therapy model, DBT, we have a skill that we teach called riding the wave of emotion. So an emotion is something that starts small and builds up and eventually becomes very intense and eventually peters off like a wave. So that's how you know there's anxiety. But it's different when you have ADHD because ADHD is something you always struggle with. At times you may be able to focus better, but you know over the course of your life there's a pattern.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
So we all got a little ADHD in us every now and then, right? Okay, cool. So many women are diagnosed later in life. Why is that? And what does ADHD often look like in adult women specific?
So I think that there's more awareness now about ADHD and more acceptance. Like when I was a kid, it was very rare that somebody got diagnosed with it. And I don't think they really even knew much about it.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So nowadays it's becoming more accepted, and people are becoming more educated because there's more information available at your fingertips with the internet. So people are trying to put together pieces of their life, like why do they struggle with certain things? Why do they continue to struggle with certain things? And by looking and seeking out for the information, and then eventually going to a professional and getting the diagnosis, they're able to look back on their life and say, now I get it.
One of the things I'm remembering is when we did the episode on autism, it was also that the girls were diagnosed later. And it's because somehow, as women or as females, we tend to, I don't know, try we have a better ability to adapt to our surroundings, I may say. And boys tend to be more rambunctious. So you can detect on, the girl is, I mean, there's girls that are rambunctious too, but you may be able to see it easier in boys because of their behaviors, where a girl, it might be until they get to school, and then you realize that she's wandering because she might be playing with her dolls over there, and the fact that she plays with the dolls and runs and forgets everything else, it's just, oh, she's just a baby. It's not seen as, wait a minute, something's going on here. So I think that might have something to do with that.
You also have to consider be real gender roles and gender socialization and expectations of the different genders. And that has a lot to do why certain things may be recognized or accepted at a later juncture or a greater juncture with certain one sex versus the other.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Doctor, you've shared that you pursued your PhD later in life. Did ADHD show up in that process? And how did you manage to focus? And how did you manage your energy?
If I may go back when I was a kid.
Okay.
I had no clue that I had ADHD as a kid. I thought it was anxiety. And now that I look back, it makes perfect sense. Back then, we didn't have TVs, so we didn't have phones, and we didn't have internet and all that stuff. So you actually had to take notes and develop skills and writing and reading and organizing your work and using a notebook. And remember Trapper Keepers?
Yes.
Yeah. So back when looking back now, I realized that it really made sense that I had ADHD, because I remember working in classrooms, assignments, other students with ADHD, and we'd be studying together in a group, and we'd all be reading parts of the chapter, and I would have to go back and read it again, sometimes twice, because I just wasn't picking up on it, because my mind was constantly wandering. And also I remember my mind just constantly chattering and talking, never stopping. And I could be having a conversation with someone, and they'll be like, what do you think about that? And I'll be like, what did you say?
You know what I mean? You're 7 worlds away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They had ADHD medication back then. I don't know, but it was just never picked up. I was always just somebody who was very anxious, quiet, struggled with social anxiety and making friends. So as I got older, and as I actually was an occupational therapist working in a school setting, and I started working with kids with ADHD and researching what it was, and then learning about it also from my studies, I realized, this kind of adding up. So, I looked at different questionnaires, and I also looked in the DSM, and I said, yep, I got it too.
So how was it more difficult for you? I mean, was it more challenging to get the PhD than the other levels? Because, with the dissertation and all the steps that you have to do for a PhD, did the ADHD had a factor in it?
You know what? No. Okay. Because I always learned ways to compensate. I'm high functioning. Not everybody is high functioning. Right. I was able to learn ways to be cognitively flexible. I had kids. They were all small at the time. So I had to learn to balance my schedule between work, taking care of my children, and then doing my schoolwork. Mm-hmm. So and that's something that I had always practiced in the course of my life, even before we got stuck there. It's something I'd always practiced. Got stuck there. It's something in the course of my life from the course of my life. Life has different demands, and I didn't have internet and all of these things that we have now to get in the way and prevent you from learning how to practice stuff. I had to figure it out.
Well, doctor, I went to college late in life too. I started at 54 and graduated 2 weeks, 5 days before my 57th birthday. So I did 4 years and 3 years. And I had a lot of anxiety. The anxiety part. Remember that Sunday night I called you? We had a family
Emergency.
My son was arrested, and that was not something that we were used to in my family. Some people are like, oh, they get arrested. No. And it bothered me so much, I didn't realize it until I failed my math class.
My goodness.
And I just knew that when I failed my math class, they were going to kick me out of school. I hadn't even been to school a year. And I called her that Sunday night. And did you understand anything that I said?
No.
She said it was like I was speaking in another language. I was so
distraught.
I was so stressed. And she just let me babble whatever I was saying until I had nothing else to come out of my mouth. You told me that when we get our diploma, our GPA is not on our diploma. And I'm like, what? She said, your diploma is going to look just like someone with 4.0. It's going to look the same. I never thought about that, but it helped me. I called my counselor. I told her what happened. She said, I understand. You cannot concentrate. Take the class later. Take it again later. When I took it again later, I made a C. That was my only C on my whole 3-year transcript.
Yeah, that was an A.
But in my mind, that C was a big A. Okay. Anxiety. Lots of anxiety. But the most anxiety was at that moment because I couldn't think of it. I could not concentrate. Even though I'm reading stuff, it was not absorbing. And I had to step back a whole lot and step forward again doing it. I thought I was going to have to quit, but I didn't, thank God. And I did get my degree in 2021. But I went through a lot of ADHD. What did I just read? What?
Well, that's a whole different thing because you can't have like you said, you can't be a little bit pregnant.
Yeah, you can be a little
You
bit
can be a little bit ADHD. You may have traces of it, but you can't just be a little bit ADHD. What are some of the coping strategies or tools that you recommend adults for managing ADHD? Like you were talking about juggling, and I hate that word because I usually pronounce it wrong. Parenting and work and relationships and school, if you're doing it, ministry, if you're doing it, church stuff. How do you do all that?
It's so good that you're asking me this question today because I'm actually in the middle of taking this amazing course, yes, coaching.
Okay.
I'm learning to be a school trainer for school professionals, and teaching them workshops on how to manage the children with ADHD. Yeah, so ADHD is typically 3 years behind in development to the average person. So you always have to think of ADHD brain, of your ADHD brain, category 2, as needing more nurturing and being patient with it and giving yourself extra time. So there's basic physical needs. You need sleep. If you're not sleeping a minimum of 10 hours, and for children it could be anywhere from 10 to 12 hours a night, you're not going to focus. You need to eat properly, have a balanced diet. If you have blood sugar that's all over the place, you're not paying what you're eating. You're just eating a little bit of candy here and a little bit of pretzels there, and you're not getting your proteins, and you're not getting your healthy fats, and you're not getting salads, and you're not balancing your blood sugar and your diet. You're not going to focus.
Right.
Okay, so those are food and your mood. It's the same DBT. You can tell I like DBT. Those have to be considerations. You also have to exercise. It doesn't have to be intense exercise. You just be walking briskly. So once you get to a part of taking care of your body under wraps, then the next strategy are just making sure that you're paying attention to your moods. I'm going to give you a quick crash course on the brain. Okay. This is our frontal lobe. Our frontal lobe is our command center. It does all the thinking, planning, organizing. This is the part of the brain that people with ADHD struggle with. Okay, and it's underdeveloped. Here in the back of the brain, there's an almond-sized part of the brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala processes emotion and connects emotion to memory. So what happens is when we're stressed out and we're not well fed and we haven't exercised and we're just not taking care of our physical health, this part of the brain shuts down faster and becomes when anxiety and emotions become amplified and shuts down the part of the brain. And this part of the brain is working overtime. And that's when we make bad decisions, and we're not absorbing information, and we're not planning, and we're not organizing, and we're basically not functioning at our optimum.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. I have a brain that never shuts up, never, ever, ever. But like I said, in my case, I don't think it's ADHD because I don't forget to do stuff. I don't know if it's that I've trained myself very well throughout life. And I'm not OCD because if you look at my house, there's no way I could be. But I'm very anal when it comes to work. Not when it comes to other things, but when it comes to work, I'm very, very anal about it. But my brain has never shut up as long as I've had memory of myself. And so
It slowed down once, scared you to death.
Girl, yes. This happened. It was one day I was already an adult. I went to the bathroom. My brain shut up for like 3 minutes. I freaked out because that had never, and it hasn't happened. I ended up at the doctor. He laughed because I was like, this has never happened again, that there was nothing happening up here. And after that, never happened again. But yeah, it freaked me out because that never happened. I said, whoo, something died in there. So, but in my case, I always have thought of it as anxiety. Now, you said something that makes me, I've been reading about ADHD because I told you I suspect the little one in here has it. And you were talking about little ones needing 10 to 12 hours of sleep. But I've also read that usually that's one of the signs that they have ADHD is the fact that they tend to sleep less than regular kids. And I've seen that in him, that he doesn't sleep since he was a baby. He has not slept more than 8 hours. And I think he should sleep 12 hours. That would be delightful. but he doesn't. And I thought that was one of the things that, their brains tends to wake up sooner because of the, I guess, the energy in their bodies.
Most kids with ADHD, I would say, and even adults as well, do sleep more and need more sleep. But it's not everybody. I mean, everybody's body is different.
Right.
And people have different personalities. But in general, quality sleep is more important for kids with ADHD. And a lot of kids with ADHD do struggle with sleep-wake cycles.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
Doctor, there's often this feeling that, I should have all this together by now. Okay, I'm 62 years old.
What do you want?
And I need to have all this together. What would you say to someone who feels shame around their ADHD diagnosis in their adulthood?
I don't think it's even just about ADHD. It's also culture. Our culture has very, very high pressure and expectations. And problem. Pressure on our thing.
Now, I can understand that being a cultural
It is.
thing. I truly believe that when my brother was growing up, he definitely had ADHD, but he was also brilliant. He didn't have to study, and he would make an A on the test. I studied for 3 days. I get a C, okay? But now that I look back,
Well, and I think that's one of the myths sometimes is that kids with either learning disabilities or ADHD they're not smart, and that's not the case. It's just that they process information differently.
Yep.
Am I correct on that one? Okay. Yeah.
And see, back then, people were saying, he's bad. He's just bad. He's bad. It's
Well,
like,
because they thought that the hyperactivity was behavior that it was It was not them not being able to control themselves. It was just them wanting to be bad or do things that, were not acceptable.
In this APTS
Coaching
coaching certification course that I'm doing to do workshops and teachers and classroom staff, one of the things that I really like is that they call ADHD for what it is. It's a disorder of executive function. Executive functions. When you think of an executive is top of the company. The executive is the one who is masterminding operations and giving out tasks to people and fighting who has the skills and ability to do the task and giving out deadlines. And that's something where the ADHD brain tends to break down.
And they're also visionaries. They can, see, like, I don't see that. Well, I can see it. Okay.
Let's talk about relationships. How somebody who's diagnosed with ADHD, how does that affect their way of communicating with others, handling conflict, making connections in marriage and parenting? How does that affect their social life?
Wow, what a question. Deep. Yeah. It varies from person to person, but relationships can be difficult for people with ADHD, especially if they have a partner who does not have ADHD. And oftentimes opposites attract. And I'll give you an example. My husband and I have ADHD, and he's a complete opposite. Polar opposite. He's very good at time management and planning and thinking, and it requires us to be very creative in our relationship and divvying out roles and who and responsibilities. And he should do this and who should do that and communication and getting along.
Right.
But the thing about people with ADHD and relationships is that it can go either way. There is a personality trait. Some people with ADHD are more chilled, more relaxed, easygoing. But usually people with ADHD tend to feel emotions very deeply and are not necessarily so chilled and relaxed. They can be very intense people. So people with ADHD misread very easily. And they tend to go from 0 to 60 very quickly and make assumptions. And they have to learn to train themselves to understand patterns and understand where their thinking tends to get them into trouble and make poor decisions and cause them to judge situations and people poorly and cause relationships to break down. So they just have to work that much hard.
Right.
And we know that ADHD doesn't just happen in a vacuum. How do things like anxiety, depression, or trauma interact with adult ADHD?
Okay. Usually when people start processing their trauma and starting to understand the impact emotionally and cognitively that the trauma has had, that's when they discover they have ADHD, which is interesting.
Very interesting.
But generally, people with ADHD, this is my opinion, but I think research is beginning to also really this tend to be very emotional, deeply emotional people, which is why people with ADHD can go from 0 to 60 very quickly, but also bond very deeply with others. But they have to learn to be aware of their emotional and really learn skills to learn to regulate their emotions. It doesn't mean send the emotions away. I'm not going to feel anymore. I'm going to regulate my emotions. My emotions are going to get turned off. That's not what emotional regulation is. Emotion regulation is learning to turn down the dial on the emotion so that you don't act out and make decisions that you regret later, and that you learn to basically let the emotion flow through you. Emotion doesn't go away, but you allow the wave to come and go out more smoothly than if you didn't have the emotion regulation skills.
We were talking about, how you talk about the executive in there. Can you talk a little bit about executive dysfunction and how it plays on the day-to-day with adults with ADHD?
Yeah. Executive functions are things that we're doing all the time without realizing it. Planning, organizing, mathematics, budgeting, time management. So a
So
person
a
with
person with
ADHD
ADHD
really has
really
to
has
sit
to sit
down
down
and think
and think
about what
about
their
what their
strengths
strengths
are and
are and
in experience
experience
where they've
where
gone
they've gone
wrong.
wrong.
And they
And
have
they
to
have to
really,
really,
really
really
learn
learn
skills
skills
or
or
practice
practice
skills
skills
to
to
learn
learn
compensate for their
for their
weaknesses.
weaknesses.
And this is a
This is a
self-discovery
self-discovery
process.
process.
Although
Although
nowadays
nowadays
they're
they're
trained
trained
coaches
coaches
certified in
certified in
coaching for
coaching for
ADHD
ADHD
who can
who can
help
help
people
people
figure out
figure
what
out
their weak
what their weak
areas
areas
are
are
and then
and
figure
then
out
figure
ways
out ways
to
to
compensate.
compensate.
What's your take on medication for adults with ADHD, and what role does therapy and coaching play alongside?
Loaded
Loaded
question.
question.
Becoming more
Becoming more
accepted for
accepted
people with
for with
ADHD
ADHD
adults to take
adults to take
medication,
medication.
and
And
people have to
people
just
have
be
to just
aware
be
of the
aware
side
of the
effects
side
of
effects of
medication.
medication.
It
You know,
can
it
cause
can cause
people
people
to
to
not feel
not feel
tired
tired
and feel like
and
they
feel
have
like they
lots
have
and lots and lots of
lots of
energy.
energy.
It can make
It can make
moods go
moods
either
go either
way.
way.
It can
It
take
can
away
take away
appetite,
appetite,
which is not a
which is
good
not a
thing
good
because
thing
then you're
because
not
then you're
eating
not eating
properly and
properly,
getting
getting
a
proper
proper
balanced
diet.
diet.
So you have
So
to
you have
think
to
about
think
that.
about that.
You have to
You
talk
have to
about it
talk
with your
about it with your
doctor.
doctor. There's
There's
also
also um, a newer
a
class
newer
of
class of
medication
medication
now,
now,
something called
called
Calibrate,
Calibrate,
which is
which is
not
not
traditional
traditional
ADHD
ADHD
medication.
medication.
These
These
traditional
traditional
ADHD
ADHD
medications are
medications are
stimulants.
stimulants.
Yeah, and so
And
what
so
happens
what
with
happens with
stimulants is
stimulants
they go
is they
up
go
and then
up
they
and then they
crash.
crash.
Calibrate is a newer
Calibrate is a newer
medication
medication
that
that
I
I
believe
believe
it's a blood
it's a
pressure
blood pressure
medication,
medication,
and
and it
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 doesn't
doesn't
have that
have that
crash effect
crash effect
that the
that the
stimulants have,
stimulants have,
and it
and it
lasts
lasts
longer.
longer.
So
So
that's
that's
something that's
something that's
available now
available now,
to people, and I'm
people.
sure
And
they're
I'm sure
coming
they're
up with
coming
some
up with
new
some new
medications
medications
for
for
ADHD as
ADHD as
well.
well. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's talk about the strength
mhm.
of these adults. What are some great things about living with a ADHD brain?
Creativity,
Creativity,
compassion,
compassion,
the ability
the
to be
ability to be
compassionate
compassionate
and
and
passionate,
passionate,
the
the
ability to be
ability to be
empathic,
empathic,
the
the
ability to think
ability to
outside the box,
box
and
and
problem
problem
solve
solve
in
in
creative ways
creative ways
that
somebody maybe without
ADHD wouldn't have
wouldn't
the
have
ability
the
to
ability
do.
to do.
These are some
These
of
are
the
some of the
strengths.
strengths. Going back a little bit on the medication, if somebody chooses not to go the medication route, what are some of the strategies they can do to manage their ADHD without the pharmaceuticals?
I'm in that
I'm in that
category.
category.
I don't
I
take
don't take
medication
medication
mostly
mostly
because I
because
have a
I
blood
have blood
pressure
pressure
issues and the
issues and the
stimulants
stimulants
can't
can't
work with that.
work with that.
So
So
basically just
basically,
being
just being
self-aware,
self-aware,
making
making
sure,
sure,
again,
again,
getting proper
getting proper
exercise,
exercise,
taking care of the
taking care of the
body.
body.
You have to
You
take
have
care
to
of the
take care of the
body. If you don't
body. If
take
you don't
care of your
take care of
body,
your
you can't
body, you can't
expect
expect
to manage
to
your
manage your
ADHD well.
ADHD well.
Making sure
Making
that you're
sure that
eating
you're eating
properly,
properly,
sure
making
that
sure that
you're
you're
taking care
taking
of your
care of your
health by
health
going
by
to
going to
doctors and
doctors and
keeping up
keeping up
with whatever
with whatever
physical
physical
issues are
issues
going
are
on.
going on.
I think I
I
said
think I said
making sure you're
making sure
getting
you're
enough
getting
sleep,
enough sleep,
making sure
making
that
sure that
you
you
balance
balance
social
social
time,
time,
friendships
friendships
properly with
properly
work
with work,
and not
and not
misbalancing your
misbalancing
life.
your life.
It can't be
It
too
can't be
much
too
work,
much
work, work all the
work all the
time,
time,
and then not
and then not
family and
family and
social
social
and
and
personal
personal
time,
time,
which people
which
tend to
people
do.
tend to do.
People tend to
People tend to
have lives
have
that are
lives
very,
that are
very
very, very
imbalanced.
imbalanced.
And just
And just
basically
basically
making
making
sure
sure
that you're
that you are
balancing
balancing
all the
all the
balls in your
balls in your
life
life
cognizantly
cognizantly
and
and
making sure
making
that you
sure
keep
that you
your
keep your
emotions in
emotions
check.
in check.
You know,
You know,
many people
many
with
people with
ADHD
ADHD
tend to feel
tend to feel
emotions more
emotions more
deeply,
deeply
in my opinion, than the
than
average
the average
person.
person.
So you have
You
to
have
learn
to
to be
learn
in
to
tune
be in
with your
tune with your
emotions and make
emotions and make
sure that
sure
you
that
are
you are
using
using
mindfulness
mindfulness
strategies
strategies
or other kinds of
other kinds of
strategies to
strategies
really
to really
keep the
keep the
emotions in check.
emotions in check.
Because the
Because the
emotions, if
emotions,
they're
if
not
they're
in
not
check,
in check,
they'll suck
they'll
up all
suck
your
up all your
energy.
energy.
Right. Now, I remember Malik was on ADHD medicine. I think he was in ninth grade, and he didn't have an appetite. When he came home from school, he just slept. That's what he did. And he told my daughter, I don't like the way I feel on this. I think they changed it, but still no appetite and sleeping all the time. And that's what he did when he was on that medication. He didn't stay on it.
No, he ended up not doing it.
He ended up not doing it, and he graduated from high school this past May. Thank God. And he's he's laid back. It's like nothing bothers him. He just chill.
Now, and that brings me to something, because my belief, and that's just my opinion, is that that child is ADD and not ADHD, because I have not seen an hair of impulsivity on him.
No hyper nothing.
There's no hyper nothing. Actually, he's totally hypo.
He's the opposite.
He is slower than molasses on a February morning. Can we talk about the difference of how that looks like somebody who has ADD versus ADHD?
So in this course that I'm taking, and I'm really learning about ADHD down to the core, they're really shifting away from the whole title of ADD, ADHD.
Okay.
Because it's not really a problem of attention. It's a problem of regulation of attention, which is an executive function. And executive function goes down to making sure that we're our physical needs, making sure that we're balancing our physical health with our mental health and our intellectual abilities. And the biggest part that people struggle with ADHD when it comes to functioning is getting started. That's the problem. Which is why the word ADHD doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the bill. It's not an attention issue. People with ADHD, nerve on it.
Yeah.
It's just getting started.
So the person with, the executive function without the hyperactivity is kind of the same thing. It's just that they're just not hyper in terms of behavior.
They learn to regulate their hyperactivity.
Okay.
Because they learn to regulate their emotion, and they also regulate their cognitive processes.
Okay.
There's something called metacognition, which is interesting. It's a very, very important function skill. Metacognition means thinking about thinking. When you want to teach them executive function skills, you say to them, you're able to do this task once. What did you do that work? And then you walk them through it. And then they have to thinking about their processes that they had used in the past, and then they're able to bring it to the present and be able to repeat those same cognitive processes.
That's very interesting. What's the class that you're taking again?
Yeah.
What was the name?
It's PTS coaching.
PTS coaching. Okay.
Yeah.
That's it's very fascinating. The brain is a fascinating thing. They say that even the brightest people in the world only use less than 15% of their brain in a lifetime. And that's amazing.
It is amazing.
That, you're doing all these things. And sometimes when we're overwhelmed, we think that we're using the whole brain.
Somebody else's too.
But in reality, that's not the way it works.
Yes.
That's wild.
Yeah, that's not the way it works. What words of hope and direction would you offer to an adult listener who's just beginning to explore this diagnosis?
It may be a quote-unquote diagnosis, but really all it is a way to help you to understand patterns in your life, to understand your brain, the way your brain works. And it gives you a place to start on a journey to figure out how to, I guess, harness your strengths and live a fuller life. Obviously, if you're looking for the diagnosis, you're looking to have the diagnosis, you're looking to improve.
Yep.
Which is metacognition, thinking about thinking. If you're thinking about if you have ADHD and thinking about the way you use things and the way you do things, it's going to help you to enhance the way you think about your thinking going forward.
Wow. And the reason I'm so wow is because understanding that question on how thought process works and how you are thinking about how are you thinking to the point of making decisions was the reason for me starting to study psychology. That was what I wanted to understand when I switched my major to psychology, because I wanted to understand thought patterns and how do you go from here to here and make those decisions with your thought process. So that's fascinating. I'm geeking out.
She's going to be wired for a while.
I'm geeking out.
When I'm teaching people medical clinician in therapy sessions, I'll say to him, "You have
you
this
have
goal.
this goal.
Think
Think
about a
about a
time that
time
you had a
that you had a
similar goal,
similar goal
and
and you
try to think
try to think
about
about
all the
all the
challenges
challenges
that
that
lay
lay
ahead of you, and that you
and that
knew
you knew
you were going to
you were
have to
going to
get
have to
through
get
to
through
get
to
to your
get
goal.
your goal.
And
And
what thought
thought
processes did
processes
you
did you
develop
develop
to work
to
through
work
those
through those
challenges?
challenges?
And how did
And
you
how
actually
did you
get to
actually
the
get to
end?
the
And
end?
what did it
And what
look
did it
like when
look
you
like
got to
when you
the
got to
end?
the end?
And people are
And
like,
people are like,
"Why are you
"Why you
telling me
ask
this?"
telling
And
me
I'll
this?"
say,
And I'll say,
"Because I said
because I
that you're
said
going to
that
have to
you're
go
going to
through
have to
the
go
same
through the same
process
process
now.
now.
You've been
You've
through
been
it
through it
before.
before.
And if you've
And
been
if you've
through it
been through
before,
it
you
before,
can
you can
repeat it."
repeat it.
And then the
And then
people
the
have the
people have the
aha
aha
moment.
moment.
Love it.
Mhm.
Love it.
Mhm.
Love it. And I'm glad you gave that example because uh, I'm a visual person. So I'm looking in my head as somebody like, like mapping it out. And that's basically what it is. You're mapping your thought process. Go ahead.
Okay. When I was a child, I know now I had not ADHD, but ADD. It was very hard for me to concentrate on anything. Okay. School, but I also had childhood trauma.
I was gonna say and that's kind of what I started saying in the conversation. Sorry for interrupt. Is sometimes the issues with concentration are they might look like symptoms of ADHD, but there's something else because you do not have processing. See, if you had ADD or ADHD, you will still have those processing problems. And you stop me when I'm wrong. And the person who has ADHD can overcome, I mean, they can cope and learn new skills, but they can't overcome that the way their brain functions. In your case, it was trauma that was causing those lapses. Like I said, in my case, I think it was anxiety that causes my brain to never shut up. It's not because I have ADHD, but it's because of anxiety. In your case, and I'm glad you brought it up, because it's good, because if we look at it, and this as somebody who studies psychology, when we start, and they say the same happens to students of medical school. When you start the whole ADHD, you could put your name on it and you have everything in there because there's traces and not the word is not traces, but there are certain things that you can identify with. We can always say, wait a minute, that could be me. And
That's me.
yeah, right. And when I started school, that was one of the things that one of our professors said, you know, if you don't catch yourself, you just put your name in front of it and you say everything in this DSM I have because there's certain traits. That's the word I was looking for that we all have in life. And with ADHD in specific, yes, you had those lapses where you couldn't process information or anything. But in your case, you said it was trauma. It's not ADD or ADHD because you don't have a processing issue with your brain per se.
Right.
It was the trauma that you were involved with, and it was a big one. Uh,
Big time.
and but it's good to talk about that too because
Mhm.
now people self-diagnose sometimes and they go like, well, if I'm distracted and I can't think and my brain always talks, then I have ADHD, and that might not be the case. It may be something else that is causing traits of the main components of ADHD, but doesn't mean that you have an executive function problem.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
But all I was
But
going
all
to
I was going to
say
say
is that
is
people
that
with
people with
ADHD don't
ADHD don't
necessarily have
necessarily have
trauma
trauma
and have
and
executive
have
functioning
executive
problems,
functioning
which is
problems, which is
exactly what you
exactly what
were
you
trying
were
to say.
trying to say.
But
But
people with
people with
ADHD do
ADHD do
feel
feel
emotions more
emotions more
intensely
intensely
than I would
than
say
I would say
people
people
without
without
ADHD.
ADHD.
So
So
trauma will
trauma will
intensify
intensify
that
that
emotional
emotional
experience even
experience
more
even more
deeply
deeply
and make it even
and make it
harder
even
for the
harder for the
person
person
who's
who's
already
already
with their
struggling with
executive
their executive
functions
functions
to be able
to be
to
able to
quote
kind of
unquote
quote
get it
unquote get it
together with
together
executive
with
Right.
executive
functions.
functions.
And so and if I got this right, what causes this is an undeveloped frontal lobe. Is that what it is?
It's an
It's an
underdeveloped
underdeveloped
frontal lobe.
frontal
Underdeveloped
lobe.
frontal lobe.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
according to the
according
course
to
that I
the
was
course I
taking,
was taking,
the research
the research
shows that the
shows that the
ADHD
ADHD
brain
brain
in
in
children is
children
3 to
is
5
3 to
years
5 years
behind their
behind their
peers.
peers.
So instead of just doing a battery of tests, an MRI or some radiology thing can be used to diagnose that a little bit more accurate nowadays?
There are
There are
psychological
psychological
tests.
tests.
The
There are
standardized tests that they can use
to
to diagnose
diagnose
ADHD.
ADHD.
For adults, there's a lot of
There's a lot of
questionnaires that they self-report, or you can have somebody else fill it out for you. That's a self-report, and it can really point towards ADHD. So there are ways to formally diagnose ADHD. I'm not necessarily trained in all those, but I do know of them.
But do you know if the field is going into that part of trying to look at, because how do they know that some research had to be done looking at brains to determine that people with ADHD have 3 to 5 years underdeveloped, so they had to be looking at some.
Yes, that came from doing MRIs and medical research combined with psychological research.
Yeah, okay. Which is fantastic because, till this day, people have a lot of stigma with mental health. So it's always good when there's medical research backing up the psychological research to make sure that people understand something that we've said in this podcast many, many times. The brain is an organ, just like any other organ, and they could have deficiencies for whatever reason. And, and it needs to be treated. Coping mechanism or making changes in lifestyle and diet or with medication or whatever, but it has issues that need to be addressed, just like the pancreas, just like the heart.
Yeah, exactly.
And I personally feel that mindfulness training is the greatest and most powerful tool for people with ADHD. In fact, there is a free mindfulness-based stress reduction course that I found online. I'm going to spell it out. Palouse mindfulness. This guy, Mr. Palouse or Dr. Palouse, he got a grant to be able to put this course together and make it free to the public. So it's PALOUSSE mindfulness.com. And I personally feel that that's the greatest tool to really be able to harness the potential of the brain of a person with ADHD.
Okay, and that's a great place to start. Oh, I remember what I was saying. We were talking about how you were talking about the thinking about thinking, and what I was I'm a visual learner, and what I was imagining is you map out your thought process, and that's how you get to the point of understanding that whole, how do you process that information and how you do it again. You have to map out almost like a diagram of your thoughts and what I thought, what made me think that. Am I right on that one? And then you map it out almost like a family tree type thing, or like a diagram, and it gets you to the point of, okay, yes, this was thinking about making breakfast, just to say something, but now I just need to use that skeleton of that to organize other parts of my life. And that is, again, fascinating.
Yeah. The brain is very fascinating.
Yeah.
I just wanted to give an example. In the class that I was taking last night, we were talking about how novel activities for people with ADHD can be very frustrating because they don't really have a concept of time. When you've done a task over and over again, it's familiar to you, you own it, you know time-wise in your head how long it'll take you. But if you have to do a new task that has a lot of steps to it, a lot of children, especially with ADHD, they don't want to start it and get the motor going, if you know what I mean, because it seems like it would take so much time. So there's a worksheet where you basically write down the name of the task, and then the next column you estimate how long it'll take, and then the next column how long you think it'll take. Then the next column is the steps, and then the column after that is how long it actually took. so that you can do the metacognition aspect of it, which is what you thought at the beginning it was going to require versus what it really did entail.
Love it.
It is so cool. The thing is that for so long, anything dealing with mental health was just taboo.
Right.
God, don't say anything about your mental health, or you'll be labeled.
Right.
Or people purposefully try to avoid you. It's like something wrong with that person. But earlier we were talking about. I lost my thoughts.
Well, while you find your thought,
Mm-hmm.
piggybacking on what you were saying about the behavior thing, I worked in my past life on an elementary school, and the teachers didn't want any kid that was too disruptive. If they didn't, and that happens still, if they didn't have medication, they didn't want them in. And there's something, like, again, that I want to say about people thinking ADHD. Behavioral issues are not necessarily equal to ADHD. There can be behavioral issues in somebody with ADHD, but it could be a parenting issue, like a boundaries issue. It could be other psychological issues. It doesn't necessarily has to be ADHD. I remember particularly a student that we had. They put him on medication. He got worse, and his issue was a parenting issue. You could have drugged them all you want. That baby that had nothing to do with it. There was no boundaries. There were some parenting issues, and that's why the kid was not behaving the way he should. Now, I'm glad one of the things you're talking about is that they're training teachers on how to identify and manage these kids in a better way. But the question is, as an employer, because we're talking about adults, you know, you tend to think, well, Josh comes to work and he's very excited and he's really good, but he never meets his timelines. And he's always like, you talk to him and, he has great ideas, but he's always, his head in space and stuff like that. I remember when I was working for corporate America, what's going to happen with somebody like that is they're going to lose their job because they're not meeting deadlines. So they're going to start getting written up and eventually they're going to be. So, and the sad part is I was working for a mental health company, but they still don't understand those things. How, as an employer, how from the workforce portion of it, employer can accommodate or address somebody who's having these difficulties?
Can you just clarify what you meant?
Sure.
Yeah.
If I'm a supervisor and I see that I have a good employee, but they're having these challenges, how could I address that to maybe see if it's not that the person is lazy, it's just that they're struggling with something? What accommodations could I make?
There's a lot of things you can do. You can break the task down into smaller increments for the employee. You could hire a coach for yourself to learn strategies, how to work with your employees with ADHD. A lot of corporations have industrial and organizational psychologists come in and literally teach the staff how to work on their individual tasks, but also together and with their employers. I'm sorry, more efficiently. So there's lots of ways you could do it. But the most important thing is to recognize what's going on with your employee and have a conversation with them. Because most likely your assumptions are wrong. People don't want to be lazy, quote unquote. They don't want to be sloppy. They want to get their work done. They want to do a good job. But sometimes they can't because they just don't have the right support.
That's true. That is true.
And that's a new way of looking at it. Because if you, again, somebody who was in corporate America for many, many years, that's not the way it's looked at. From the management standpoint, is if they're not performing the way I need them in this little mold. It's just like in school. If they're not fitting this little mold and the little robots are not producing at the same time, and we're not talking about factories, we're talking about white collar jobs, then, I need to get you out of here because you are not functioning in the chain the way you should.
Right.
And I think a lot of good talent could be saved. You have somebody that with some coping issue, or some help could be the start of the group because, and you're missing the potential and having to spend more time hiring, retraining when you have somebody that could actually do the job with just a little bit more support.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we're homeschool teachers, okay? So I was thinking about Dre
Mm-hmm.
with the homeschooling. My mom was a science teacher for 38 years. And when my brother was little, the doctor, of course, wanted to put him on medication. But she said no because she saw her children, her students sitting in class looking like zombies. They used to be hyper, whatever, but on this medication, it's like they're just there.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I don't want my
Mm-hmm.
brother to be a zombie.
Right.
Now, we did survive his childhood and teenage years, and he grew into a responsible person. He ended up being a policeman for 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know what he was going to end up. I mean, he went to college for 1 year and got bored. 1 year and got bored. And then he applied for the military. So he went in the Air Force. They sometimes say that, Air Force, they're more intellectual than the other one. I'm not putting it down. My husband is veteran Marine.
And yeah, that's a
Okay.
whole conversation.
But for my brother to go in the Air Force, that made sense for him because he's very intellectual. Came out of the Air Force, worked for the city for a little while, went to the police academy, and now he's retired. He's still practicing.
And we are.
He's retired. I know how to handle him now since I went to school and studied behavior, and I thank God for that. Um, that I can still have a relationship with him and go with him. Because sometimes he'll go this way or he'll go that way. Or, it's like, okay, buddy, I'm with you. I'm with you. He always like everything is an emergency.
Yeah, a sense of urgency.
Everything is a sense of if he has an idea about something, I want you to go to Home Depot and get ABC. Or like, okay, when do you think you'll be able to do that? Don't know. We just thought I hadn't thought about it yet.
And plus, it's 11 o'clock when you're calling me with this.
Yeah. And then he'll call us back the next day to follow up. And then he'll end up telling me and his sister, I'm the older. I just need for you to do what I ask you to do. Like, mama been gone for almost 10 years, man. Okay, daddy gone too. I just need for you to do what I ask you to do. Please.
Thank you so much for being here with us today, for coming back. We would love to have you again.
Yes.
I would love
I
it.
would
Love it.
Any
Yes.
final words for our audience?
Please.
Yes.
Yes,
I do.
I do.
I'd like
I'd
to
like to
stop focusing
focusing
in our
in our
society
society
on labels. And
And
instead
instead
of looking at
looking
it
at
as
it as
ADHD, which I
ADHD,
think is
which I
such a
think is
bad
such a
name
bad
for
name
it,
for it,
just know that
just
there are
know that
people
there
that
are
are
people that are
wired
wired
differently than you are.
than you are.
And
And
they may
they
not
may
be as
not be as
good
good with
time
time
management,
management,
getting things
getting
done
things
quickly,
done
getting
quickly,
started with
getting
things,
started with things,
but they sure can
but they sure
compensate
can
for it
compensate for
in
it
their depth
in their depth
and their
and their
intelligence and their
intelligence and their
creativity.
creativity.
So we need to
So we
start
need to start
changing
changing
the way we
the
look
way we
at
look at
people and
and
people who are
people who
wired
are wired
differently.
differently.
And this whole
And this whole
mental
mental
health movement, if you want to
movement, if you
call
want
it,
to call it,
mental health
mental
is
health
fluid.
is fluid.
People are
People are
fluid.
fluid.
They're not
They're not
fixed, nor our brains fixed. So let's start looking at quote unquote ADHD, which isn't a mental health diagnosis nowadays, as a power, a superpower, if not, as opposed to being a mental health disorder.
Right.
Thank you, doctor,
Thank
so
you
much.
so
My pleasure.
much.
We appreciate you. We appreciate your knowledge, your insight, your experience. And like Naty said, whatever you're into in the future, just reach out to us because you're one of those guests that we just love seeing over and over and over again. Okay?
Thank
Because
you.
you're helping us to grow as well.
Mhm.
We really, really appreciate you. And sitting here, I've also been thinking about how to deal with my grandson differently, the one that we're teaching now, and to encourage the older one who's all laid back and stuff. Because I told him, you either got to go to school or get a job. Okay, you're out of high school, you got to do something. He's like, okay. I'm like, you look for a job yet? No, but I will. Okay. Thank you, doctor.
Bye-bye.
And to our listeners, thank you for spending time with us on Thrive by the Rising News. If you found this episode helpful, please share with a friend or a loved one navigating similar challenges.
And remember, if you're experiencing a mental health crisis, please dial 988. If a loved one is experiencing a mental health crisis, please dial 911 or take them to the nearest emergency room. If you think you're in a domestic violence relationship and you need to talk or some assistance, you can dial 8799-233 or 887. Please make sure you are in a safe space when you're reaching out for help.
And I'm just letting you know that it's 887 text. And we believe that you are capable of thriving, even when life feels messy and overwhelming. And we'll be here for you every step of the way. So until next time, stay anchored, stay hopeful, and don't forget to thrive.
You forgot to keep rising.
Well, keep rising too.
Keep rising too. And don't forget to thrive.
Have a blessed day.
Bye-bye.